Wait a minute. I saw that on the Discovery Channel. Yeah, about jellyfish and how if you... Ew! You peed on yourself?
Ew! You can't say that. You don't know. Anyway, I tried, but I couldn't bend that way. So?
That's right, I stepped up. She's my friend and she needed help. If I had to, I'd pee on any one of you.
I just wanted to let you know about my study group.
Oh, don't be a fuddy-duddy. I'll be your study buddy.
I'm about to embark on one of the great challenges of my scientific career.
This work right here is going to change history.
I think this is going to be our greatest mission.
I don't have time to study. I'll never get into Stanford.
I got big plans for you tonight. I got maps, I got charts. I'm going to see you through this because my credibility is on the line.
It's at this point that you'll want to start taking notes.
Welcome to the Sitcom Study, the podcast where we contemplate the TV shows we grew up with and search for the truth and wisdom within the tropes and cliches. And Amy, what are we talking about today?
We're going to the beach.
Going to the beach. These are beach episodes
Get
of
out
sitcom.
your sunscreen.
Yep, plain and simple. So, I feel like we often have been debating lately about what's a trope versus what's just a thing that happens or something, because I tend to think everything is a trope. Here's one where I'm really like, going to the beach. Like,
right, it's a setting.
It is. It's a setting.
But it's usually like an event.
It has very specific connotations and all kinds of sort of roles in our society. But I'm saying this because this is one where, I often go into each podcast episode going like, all right, I try to do my little due diligence sort of thinking, gathering my thoughts ahead of time about, the questions I always ask. Why do they keep going back to this in the sitcoms? Where does it get these sitcom writers to do this? What is the...
Well, it's a ratings grab. The bikinis, the hot young stars in the bikinis. But we even had a little bit of child porn in this lineup.
Yeah, we're going to have...
very uncomfortable.
Lots of beach bods. But I guess what I'm getting at is this is one where I'm excited about this conversation because this is kind of a question mark for me. This is one where all four of these episodes definitely have some things in common and will have some fun overlaps, but they really do all do different stuff with this beach thing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of interested to sort of talk through and figure out what is the through line, if there is one. What do these different shows... Yeah, sand, water. What do these different shows gain from going to the beach? So what's our lineup? What are the shows we watched?
We watched Mr. Ed, Season 2, Episode 23, Ed the Beachcomber. Who's the Boss, Season 2, Episode 6, Custody Part 1. Married with Children, Season 3, Episode 21, Life's a Beach. And Friends, Season 4, Episode 1, The One with the Jellyfish.
Yeah. Now, this is a time where we've made the episode topic topical to what's going on, but not to what's going on in the world. This is what's going on or has been going on in our lives because we just got back from a big beach trip.
Yes. Jay the vampire went to the beach.
So we'll get to my feelings in a moment. I'll ask you, mostly on behalf of the listeners, what is your experience with an opinion about the beach?
I grew up in Florida. Even so, my family very often took beach vacations to other beaches. So yeah, we were very much a beach family. I was a lifeguard, albeit at a pool, but yeah, I'm a beach person. But as you know, because I've told you this, those of us who live in Florida, like once you are not a kid anymore, like Floridians don't go to the beach. Like people who grew up in Florida, we don't go to the beach. It's just the tourists and the newcomers that go to the beach.
It's like if you live in New York City, you don't go hang out at the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
But, yeah, I grew up by a beach also. It happened to be a lake beach.
Gross, not a real beach.
If you've ever seen the SNL parody song about the lake beach culture and wading in the 3 feet of leaves and getting bitten by snapping turtles and the water being brown and all that stuff, it's all true. But yeah, I did, as a kid, that was one of the standard things we would do. You go to the park, you go to the beach or whatever, and yeah, you would splash around in the lake. You would go on the little sailboats and whatnot. And of course, having grown up in the New York City area, we would go to Jones Beach once in a while, Jersey Shore, etc. My feelings on the beach are very complex because I understand as an adult now, there are certain things that are, look, everybody's different, but I feel like it's almost an objective statement to say that, like, the aesthetics of the beach, the ocean, all of that stuff, it's a very calm, peaceful, sort of serene environment. The whole sort of like majesty of nature and everything. Like I very much, for me now, something like what we just did, hanging out at a beach house, being in proximity to a beach where you can observe it and maybe, experience it up close as needed, for small amounts of time.
You can be near the beach, you can see the beach, but you don't have to have sand between your toes.
Yes. My main objections to the beach are two things. One is the sensory element of it. Like you mentioned before, I'm extremely pale, so I'm prone to sunburns. The solution to that is sunscreen, which I also have a horrible sort of like sense memory connotation with it. That smell, that feeling of wiping or smearing that white crap into your skin. Like I don't like any of it. A male bathing suit, the notion of putting on a pair of shorts with that weird netting inside. The weird netting inside the bathing suits, the sand like you talked about, just everything. I don't like the feelings of it. And especially when I was a little kid, my biggest sort of problem with going to the beach is just boredom. I'm just not the kind of personality that wants to go swimming for hours or hang out on a towel for hours.
No, you got to build sandcastles, play paddleball, play volleyball.
Sure, and I did all those things as
your
a kid.
dad.
But I've seen
like
firsthand.
Joey, dig a hole.
Yes, we did dug holes, believe me. But I've seen firsthand the contrast between me and friends of mine where, and sometimes this would be the lake beach, but where I would go down to the beach with friends at 11 a.m. And by 1 p.m., I'm like, all right, cool. I want to go home. I want to draw my comic books and play my computer games. And some people are just like, let's hang out here all day and then go first thing in the morning tomorrow.
I think your thing too is like the outside of it all, like just the being
the outside
for so
the no
long.
shade, just the notion that going to the beach means necessarily being in the sun.
Right.
And that's exactly the kind of thing like, sure, sign me up for beach volleyball for an hour and then I'll go away and do something else. Let's begin with Mr. Ed. Now, Mr. Ed, Wilbur, everybody, they're all on thin ice, right?
That's
they were essentially almost
They were doing
banned
yellow face last
from
time
the
we saw
sitcom
them.
study.
Yes.
Yeah, look, we have watched a lot of things in these old sitcoms that don't age super well. That's part of the fun of going back and excavating these pop culture things. The last time we watched Mr. Ed, the weird yellow face plot turn that took was probably the most offensive thing we've ever covered. You can listen to our sitcoms Tackle the Cold War episode if you want to relitigate that.
Yep.
So we've got a suspicious eye. We are cautiously, on a probationary basis.
Tiptoeing back into Mr. Ed.
We're welcoming Mr. Ed back into the family for, this episode. What did we watch?
So this is season 2, episode 23, Ed the Beachcomber. And this time, they're not doing anything offensive. They're just kind of making fun of beatniks, which were the original hipsters.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I found this very interesting. This is all going to revolve around beachcombers, which was not a term I was familiar with. The title of this episode is Ed the Beachcomber. I assumed they meant he was going to be a guy that went around with the metal detector looking for treasures and stuff. I figured that's a beachcomber.
Yeah. I always think of it as like the tractors that come through with the big rakes that clean the cigarette butts and stuff.
But the way it is deployed in this episode there are these beatniks that are squatting on this beach property.
Right.
But it was so interesting watching this. I was like, oh, totally. These are the hipsters. It reminded me a lot of the rise of hipsterism in the
God,
early
the
2000s. Yeah, well, and how, like, again, living in the city, I mostly experienced the East Coast Brooklyn flavor of hipsterism.
Right.
But there was also, you know, like if you've seen the movie Ingrid Goes West, there is that exactly this, that Matthew McConaughey West Coast beachy hipster.
Right.
That movie where Elizabeth Olsen and Wyatt Russell play this parody of those sort of like Instagram influencer, you know, beachy hipster types.
Yes.
And yeah, this thing has totally come back around. But yeah, before we get there, this is all going to be, I feel like the other one we watched had a similar thing. Mr. Ed is disgruntled, right?
Yes.
This all starts with he's read something in the newspaper and he's fit to be tied, he says. He's milling around his little like office / barn.
Yeah, he's kind of sort of acting like he's cleaning things up, but he's really just sort of throwing things around. He's just angry. He's because he read this editorial in the newspaper that said that horses are extinct. Horses are going extinct, not the actual species, but their usefulness in the world.
Yes, and maybe even that, you know, portends that they'll literally be extinct. But yes, I found this a very interesting. This to me was like it's like somebody complaining about the Emancipation Proclamation or something. They're saying we don't use them for like riding and whipping as much anymore, and
we don't use
objects
them
to that.
for labor. We don't they're not useful. They're not helpful.
Yeah.
They're not like a part of society in the way that
you
they
don't
used to be.
see them on TV.
And he's like,
stuff.
"What do you mean I'm not useful? I'm very useful."
Yes. I noticed, I don't know, you're doing a sitcom called Mr. Ed. He's complaining about an editorial. You do nothing with that? Like, come on, guys. Asleep at the wheel sitcom right
No
here.
dad jokes for you, Jay.
Yeah. So yeah, he demands equal time, and then we sort of pivot to what's going to be the crux of the story. The neighbor, this old guy, Mitch or whatever, comes.
No, Mitch is what he calls him when when he's like, "You don't know me, we're not even friends," because he was trying to get a discount.
Right.
Like he was teasing him. His name's actually Roger Addison.
Roger Addison.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Mr. Addison.
Yes.
So Mr. Addison's all bent out of shape because of these beatniks.
Yeah,
He
he's
says-
got squatters, and he's trying to sell his beach property. And I guess Wilbur is an architect, but is trying to help secure a buyer.
He just knows people, I guess, in that world.
I guess.
So he's trying to help. Yeah, the neighbor describes them. He says they're playing records, burning campfires, building surfboards, toasting weenies, right? He's got all these, like, issues of what they're doing.
Yes.
And I guess the thing is, his wife is more of, she has like a hippy dippy attitude, and she's just kind of like, let them be.
Yeah, her thing is, look, these youths are disgruntled, and that's because no one ever takes them seriously.
Yes, they need love.
They need love. So we should support them and say, hey, that art that you're making is good. And so they eventually do come by and they bring some art, and everybody reacts like, ugh, to it. But then she's like, thank you so much. And she hangs it over the fireplace. And yeah, she is more taking like an open attitude to these kids.
Yeah, she's more compassionate. She's like, oh, they're just kids. They don't mean any harm. And yeah, they're like you said, sort of disaffected. And so,
they'll leave as soon as you ask if you sell the property. But until you sell the property, his point's like, there's nobody that's going to buy the property if these kids are there.
Which is kind of true, I would think.
Yeah, and that is what ends up happening. The buyer does drop out. He goes over there to get all mad at them and yell, but then, plot twist, he gets some attention for allowing these beatniks to be there.
Yeah, the beatniks, they're very funny. The beachniks, we should say. That's a portmanteau of the day. It's a boy and a girl, or, this young man and women that show up as the sort of ambassadors to basically ask for like...
Yeah, Buzz and Zelma.
Yeah, and they're essentially like, they don't realize how sort of audacious their request is when they walk over and say, oh, we want to put up lean-tos so we can really turn this into like an artist's colony.
Which sounds very audacious now because like private beach and all that. But like at that time, I think it was a little bit more like it's,
but
public
it's more
land
like,
and stuff.
They don't realize that they're walking into a debate between the husband and wife about kicking them out in the first place.
In the first place,
and they're walking over going, hey, Daddy-O, you mind if we set up some lean-tos? shoes.
Can we talk for a second about the Huck Finn straw hats all of the guys and the girls that are these beachniks that are wearing?
Yeah,
I was like, that's a very
And even
weird...
Mr. Ed basically wears one later when
He
he
does.
joins their culture. I mean, I guess that was the style. I have to kind of take their word for it. I don't know what...
It reminded me of, and maybe this is like true to time, but it reminded me, because this is 63.
63 or 62,
It reminded
I think.
me of South Pacific, which is
Yeah.
in the early 40s, because it's during World War II, but it was the kind of hats that you'd see on the stage, like you'd see everybody wearing to keep the sun off their heads in South Pacific, which I'm assuming is similar to what people wore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like an ironic throwback that the beachniks are wearing.
Yeah. Yeah, this whole thing, like you said, 1962. And so it's sort of like, I think beatnik, I think of like the turtlenecks and stuff. Like I have a certain stereotype.
That's like that New York with the cigarettes and like the Audrey Hepburn and the very cool.
Yeah, it is a little bit of the East Coast, West Coast. And just this is so far before our time that, like our stereotypes have been whittled down into these little sort of echoes, you know, of like what it really was.
Can you imagine Allen Ginsberg at a beach?
Well, here's the thing. Like, right, stylistically, yes.
It's like so dark,
The
right?
sartorial choices don't match up, but what these kids start doing is very Ginsberg,
Oh
right?
my
They
God.
have this poem that they keep sharing. It's called Rejection. And so she goes, rejected, neglected, befuddled, bemuddled. And then, like, she keeps going on, but it becomes this, like, recurring thing.
And they are doing, every time they do it, she like stomps or they like,
He has a staff or something.
The guy beats his fist into his hand when Mr. Ed takes over it and he's like, I've been rejected, befuddled, bemuddled. He like, you see somebody's got fake horse hooves on sticks and they're using them to kick the barn door.
Yeah, that's
to
what
like,
happens when, Mr. Ed
to make the beat of the beat poetry.
Yeah, so that's the next sort of plot turn here. I'll say, with almost all of these episodes, they have the issue of, what I'm always kind of worried about when we start these episodes sight unseen, that they don't have as much of the trope, maybe, as I would like.
Right.
In this case, it takes a while to get to the beach, know, as we have this whole debate first between the husband and wife, and then the two beachniks come over, and then eventually Mr. Ed, right, when we finally check back in with him, and Wilbur's trying to calm him down, Mr. Ed basically decides to like run away from home and join the beachnik art colony.
That's right. Because so the whole reason they want to put up these lean-tos is because they're sort of starting an artist colony and they have invited all these people to come see their art show. And so they want to put up these lean-tos so the art can be protected and there can be some sort of structures there so people can come see and buy the art. And, of course, Mr. Addison is like apoplectic. He's like, absolutely not. But his wife sort of talks him into it. But in the meanwhile, Mr. Ed has gotten he hears this poem and it resonates with him. So he says he puts on these big old sunglasses and a very flowery straw hat.
Yeah,
His
it looks
isn't-
like a hat that a woman would wear to a fancy wedding.
like
or
a
something
fancy
like that.
garden party or
Yeah.
something. It's very flowery, whereas theirs are just straw. And he goes to the beach, and the beatniks are all like, oh man, look at that horse. That horse is so cool. Do you think you could get that horse to pose for you? And then the Zelma, whatever her name is, girl, is like, yeah, totally. And so then...
Well, no, they're surprised. They're all like, a horse could never pose, and then because they don't know Mr.
Right,
Ed
but
understands
she's like,
English.
I can get it. I can get him to do it. And he walks over and he poses. And so then there you go. She makes a very abstract picture that she says is a horse. And everybody's looking at it and they're like, man, it's just missing something. Mr. Ed walks by, swishes it with his tail, having some like white paint on his tail. And there's a blob now in the middle. And they're like, oh, he knew just what to do. Like, man.
Yeah, and then we get the very sitcom-y story beat that you always get in something like this, where Wilbur finally catches up to him, and you get the sort of like, hey man, check out the new me, let me explain my whole new attitude type thing. And so in this case...
These are the people who understand me.
Yeah, and I love Mr. Ed is now a beat poet. And so he's going, life is a feed bag without any oats. It's amazing. And then, he's saying that he's embracing this therapeutic painting. He's made a painting that he calls the horseless head man.
Right.
And it's like a stick figure. It's all, it's very funny. It's, again, just that sitcom-y thing of what if Mr. Ed was a beatnik for a few minutes? What would that be like?
What would that be like? So, in the meanwhile, now Mr. Addison has found out from Wilbur that the buyer has backed out. And, okay, so there was a little bit of a plot twist in there. He comes around. His wife, Mrs. Addison,
is a very interesting
convinces him to come around and let these kids have their fun, and
they
it'll be fine.
They reminisce about their time at the beach. She starts playing the ukulele with him, and they're talking about,
like when they used to hang out on the beach.
I will just say the line and you can explain the context. You were always the slipperiest girl on the beach. Well, you always managed to find a good grip or something. What the hell were they talking about?
Well, so the line before you were always the slipperiest girl on the beach was them saying the wife was like, you and this other guy used to fight over who would put the suntan oil on me.
Yeah.
So then
which we're gonna see.
She was the slipperiest girl on the beach because they both would try to put suntan oil on her, and then she would be very greasy.
Yeah, it's weird. Just that statement is weird.
I thought it was really cute.
We're definitely going to see that as a subtrope, oiling up sexy young ladies.
Suntan oil. I thought that was a really cute scene.
Oh,
the two of them
definitely
reminiscing. If they're talking about being teenagers 20 years ago, and this is what you said, 1962, so that'd be 1942. That means
it's like the beaches of Normandy.
No, that means it was like right before he probably got sent off to war, because they were talking about being teenagers. And so, but yet old enough to be able to go to the beach and all of that with your friends. So I was just like, wow, and then they weren't kind of commenting on how they grown and changed over the years, but they are older than Wilbur and his wife.
Oh yeah.
And so it was just really interesting to see that generational difference, hear them talking about it. They were reminiscing about how they were misunderstood and how the adults didn't get them. And then he was like, then the wife was like, just like these kids now. And he was like, okay.
Yeah. They say, I guess every generation of kids feels rebellious and misunderstood. And the whole time there's music soaring under this. It was this very sort of cheesy music bed.
It was his ukulele. Duh.
It wasn't though. It was like this cheesy string music. And it is, again, super sitcom-y the way the husband, Mr. Addison, is like, all right, touche. You caught me in your logical web of, intrigue. And yes, you've got me to admit that I can empathize with the beachniks, so I guess I'll let them stay. So he goes back to the beach.
No, he's agreed. He's going to let him stay. And in comes Wilbur, and he says the buyer dropped out. And then Addison immediately gets all mad again and storms off to the beach to go throw them off.
Right. So they get to the beach and they found, like you said before, they're being celebrated because they're allowing the beatniks to stay.
Right. So the art show is in full swing and there's tons of people there. And it's this it's always weird to see people in suits and dresses walking through sand.
Yeah. Kind of like Angela
I
later.
know. We're going to see this in several of these episodes. Fully clothed, stockings, heels, suits, three-piece suits.
That's pretty much me on the beach most of the time. It's
so
taking off my socks is as far as I'll go.
And you can't even walk. I don't know how people do it. But anyway, so there's all these people, perusing the art on the beach, and Addison comes marching up, and one of the kids, the Buzz kid that we met earlier, is being interviewed by the press, and the press immediately is like, oh, you're the owner of this property? Man, thank you so much. This is so great that you would do this. And, really these, just celebrating him. And he's like, oh, well, yes, it was all my idea. And, somebody's got to give these kids a little love. And he just repeats his wife's speech from the beginning of the episode. And and then he's completely turned the other cheek again because the press thinks he's a good guy.
Yeah, exactly. He'll take the good, the good publicity over the money. And then, of course, we get the turn with Ed, just like any sitcom plot with this sort of arc, just kind of realizing, there's no place like home. He talks to Wilbur.
I'm going to get a sunburn on my tail.
Well, what he says, which I found interesting, he goes, I guess I would look pretty silly on a psychiatrist's couch because there is such a strong connection here, this association between the ennui and the sort of like, what back in that time,
soul searching.
Yeah, and that weird stigma about therapy and any sort of mental illness and anything to do with that. And it's just so funny how like nobody even really said anything about psychiatry or anything like that. But it's at that time, that
it's
connection.
Like the Timothy Leary,
whole, if you're hanging out with these kind of people, you're probably going to a weird head shrinker and talking about your feelings and stuff. It's just funny how that's the way he sort of chooses to say, I don't really fit in with these beach kids.
Yeah.
And he kind of goes back home and everything's normal. And so, in terms of tracking the trope, you get the fact that it's a beach property is interesting because you have just that in itself is a weird sort of subtrope of like, some people have beach houses,
right.
And that's like a thing that well-to-do people have that maybe, like rebellious teenagers, like they could have use for that, but they're not the hoity-toity people that would own something. And then, I don't know what why did this have to be a beach as opposed to just like anywhere else?
I mean, I don't know. I think that it's interesting. This is the one episode that we're really not getting like, oh, we're going to put the cast that we know and love in bikinis to boost ratings. This is just funny that there's a horse on the beach and it's not like some romance movie where, the horse is galloping and the lovers or whatever. No, this is just like the horse is like, hey, it's a silly moment.
Yeah.
My bigger question is, isn't that a pain in the ass for the film crew to shoot on the beach? Like, sand gets everywhere.
Yeah,
and these tiny little cameras and like, I mean, all the little nooks and crannies, I guess the cameras weren't tiny at the time, but I mean, all the little tiny nooks and crannies in those cameras, do they work? Do they have to do like rain and wrap them in plastic bags? Like,
yeah, that's kind of, to me, that's connected to my question. Because as we were saying that, I was just kind of going like, well, hey, I guess they've got to hang out somewhere. But then it's like, yeah, but it's such a pain. And the expense of shooting at the beach is what makes me go like, I wonder why they had to make this a plot point. And I think it's the Beachcomber thing. I think at the time, this particular stereotype was just such a thing that it's like, well, hey, if we're going to do the hippies and if they live in such and such place or whatever, like, yeah, let's have them be beachcombers, as opposed to just like, oh, the guy owns an apartment complex and he needs to evict somebody or something. Yeah. And then you also have a beach. It makes sense. Like it's this big open area that Mr. Ed can trot up to, as opposed to if he was just like going up to a frat house or something. That they own.
And also they made a really strong case for kind of letting kids be kids in a way that is kind of surprising to me for the time and like the Mr. Ed type show of it all. So I just found that kind of interesting to see like they were real. This show had a message and it was, hey, the kids aren't so bad. Like let them be them.
The kids are all right. Yeah. No, it is interesting. And we're going to see, maybe traces of this, but I think it's safe to say that's not going to be the focus, or the role that the beach serves.
No, naked tummies is the focus from going forward.
All right. So let's move on to Who's the Boss?
Season 2, Episode 6, Custody Part 1.
Yeah, we've covered Who's the Boss once or twice before. We did it on our Dreams episode where, was it Tony or Angela that had the dream?
Angela had the dream, that they were married.
I'm sure I said then what I'll say now. When it comes to male... when it comes to sitcoms from the 80s about a young man being hired to keep an eye on the house, to be in charge, if you will, there's only one person in my life, and that is
who has the same
Scott
accent.
Baio as Charles. Yes, when it comes to young Italian men being hired to take care of a blonde household.
We should do an episode that's Charles in charge.
Versus Tony?
No, Charles, Tony, and Joey Lawrence, Melissa and Joey. It's the same show.
True,
we got to
but
find one more.
He doesn't even have any hair.
It's true. They get less and less hair as time goes on.
and there definitely are others.
Yeah, we got to find another Italian Manny to round out that episode.
Who's the Boss has never been my thing. It's interesting how I feel like now Who's the Boss has this weird status as like, if you're going to throw out the name of a sitcom from the 80s, Who's the Boss is one of your sort of standard go-to. Partially because of the title.
Well, yeah, but also it's earlier. Like, to me, Who's the Boss? Like, I think Webster started a couple years earlier. Family Ties started a couple years earlier. But like Growing Pains and Who's the Boss were both those sort of like mid-80s juggernauts, right? Like, and then I think me and you, we have much more of like the affection for the ones that kind of started in the later 80s and went into the 90s. And that's just our age. Like, I don't remember watching these super early episodes except for in reruns.
Right,
of
they went on in
Boss.
reruns. And even in the reruns, I wasn't into them, whereas other people were.
Yeah, I liked Who's the Boss, and I watched a lot of them. But every time we go back to one of these earlier shows, I'm always like, oh yeah, I forgot this started so much earlier than I got into it.
Yeah, so this is going to be one that's dealing pretty heavily with the whole sort of drama of the family and the setup of the show. Now, like you said, this is called Custody Part 1. I feel like a rare move for us. We're doing a two-parter and we're not covering both parts. Because the beach stuff really happens here.
Exactly.
And frankly, life's too short to get into the whole
the
drama of, the kids and who they're living with and everything.
Who's got custody instead of who's the boss. And we know the show continues, right? So Angela retains custody, but that is the big drama. I was noting how interesting this is, that it's not a season premiere or a season finale. It's smack in the middle of like the beginning of season 2. It's so weird. It's 2/6 and 2/7. Yeah. So like, I mean, probably like November sweeps, I'm guessing.
It could be, or just, I feel like they weren't as strategic, I mean, it's
some 85.
Of them at that
they were
time.
They definitely were going for the ratings during sweeps week.
No,
weeks.
sure.
And this would line up with that.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, here we are. And, in case you don't know, the premise is Tony is living in the house as the housekeeper. His daughter is his daughter is Samantha, played by Alyssa Milano. And then Angela, her son, is Jonathan, this younger blonde boy. I don't like this kid. Aww. I think he's like almost too cute. Like, there's just something.
Yeah, he's got the kid actory thing.
Yeah,
and it is that. I mean, look, like Punky Brewster, right? Like he's kind of in the similar vein of like the wide eye. Everything is said like this. Oh yeah, mom. Oh dad, I can't wait.
The difference, though, I think, is because of the way the stories are set up. Punky has to carry the whole weight of her show on her shoulders, whereas this kid, and I think
he gets to run in and out of scenes.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's a good thing, but all he gets to do is run in and out and go, gee, Dad, that's swell, and so there's nothing for him to do, and I find his face a little irritating. And so not my favorite sitcom kid, but this is going to be all about the ex-husband, Angela's ex-husband Michael, that I'm sure we're familiar with if we've been watching the show.
No, he's not in them very often.
But you've seen him. This couldn't be your very first taste of him, is it?
I don't. You know what? I'm not sure. I'll look it up. But he's played by James Naughton, so he's like he's an actor you've seen in stuff.
Yeah, I just figured he would have showed up in the first season or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he's more of like the off-screen, like. She's moved on from him. They would have no need to bring him back in as like a plot
for occasional
point,
story.
But except for something like this where it's like, oh, he's getting remarried, or I think Tony mentions the last time you saw him,
right.
like they must have hooked
they
up,
slept together
they
the
hooked
last
up last time.
Yeah,
and he always comes around for money.
Yeah, this guy, he's not Satan incarnate or anything, but he is a very typical and the the predicament he's going to present is all very typical sort of TV movie ex-husband stuff.
Right. He's moved to LA and he continues to be a narcissist. And of course, now he's met this young, blonde, sexy lady.
I just wanted to mention Sign of the Times before he even shows up, when Tony is like, oh, Angela, if you want me to tell him you're not here, if you want me to maybe tell him you're on a date with Warren Beatty, like that is hilarious to me, that your go-to
that guy in a wheelchair.
sexiest man you could think of, not Tom Cruise, not,
no. Well, and Angela couldn't date Tom Cruise. He'd come up to her navel.
Well, that's the thing. It's because Angela, yes, she's, just not super old or anything, but she's an adult woman. And it's just interesting that was the choice for her fantasy man. But yeah, so the father shows up, right? Michael, the ex-husband, the boy's father, he gives him a present. The present is an iguana.
Yeah.
Now, my girlfriend in college had a pet iguana, right? His name was Dave or
How'd you
Doug
deal with
or
that?
something. Well, the thing is, I didn't have to deal with it. I just don't think lizards and like reptiles are cute. And
agreed.
Pets that need to be kept in some kind of tank or cage or something. I don't know what relationship you have with that animal, keeping them captive in a little terrarium or whatever while you live your life. I was never a fan of Dave the iguana back in the day. And when he takes this thing out, I'm just like, I get, look, if I was a 10-year-old kid, maybe this would be like an appealing thing, but bad pet in my opinion.
Right. And of course, we're never going to see this iguana again. And this is only a plot point to show that he is like, that the dad is super thoughtless and would give the kid a pet that he never has to do anything with and would just dump on his ex-wife.
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess what happens here, you mentioned that it's the dad, he's engaged. He's got this sexy new blonde, fiance named Heather. This is the kind of role I feel like in the 2000s Malin Ackerman maybe would be cast in. We eventually get to meet her. She is this sexy blonde woman. Look, Angela's a sexy blonde woman too. This lady is just a little younger and she is not a advertising mogul like Angela is. She's got more of the Beach Bunny type of attitude.
She's an assistant to Michael.
Yes. Oh, well, it's funny. When they ask her what she does, she says, I'm in the documentary business, which I've never heard that as a longtime film, aficionado. I've never heard anyone refer to themselves as being in the documentary business. But yeah, she's his assistant, Michael, and I guess he's a documentary filmmaker or producer or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, this is all going to be Michael saying, hey, do I have your permission? Can I take Jonathan to come hang out with us on the beach? And then, I think Tony or somebody has the bright idea.
Yeah, he wants to bring Jonathan to California to be his best man.
Right. Okay. Let's pause on that for a second. Am I crazy, or is that a terrible idea that you would never do? If you're getting married for a second time and your son is like an 8-year-old boy, that's why they invented the flower children or the ushers or whatever.
You don't have bearer.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have an 8-year-old kid be your best man. That just sucks for everybody.
I don't know.
Is he in charge of the bachelor party?
No. I think this would be more of a situation where they wouldn't have that, or it would just be his friends that did that for him. It's one of those, it's an honorary thing. My best friend, his son, albeit his son was older, his son was 19 or 20 or something when he got married. That his son was his best man.
Yeah, well, that is different.
And his son didn't plan the bachelor party. I did. We did it all together. And so I think it was a little bit more of, as friends, the rest of us who were in the groom's party, we put all that stuff together. And then, Jordan was invited. And we made sure that there were things, because he was over 18. Or he was either 18, he was 19 or 20. So, we made sure that there were things that he could come to, and that was not just all bars that were 21 and up.
Was he able to, did he speak at the wedding?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
That is the difference. I was going to bring up the example. Yeah, we went to a wedding where there was the child of the from the first marriage gave a very stirring speech, and it was really effective and nice. But he was a 20-year-old kid. He wasn't 8 years old. And there's just something, you're right. It's an honorary thing, and we're not even supposed to think it through that much because it's just a stupid show.
And also, there are many examples of how this dad is a bad dad and kind of a bad human in general. And I just don't, I don't necessarily think this is one.
I just heard that. I was just like, make him the ring bearer or something like that. Especially this guy. I'm like, come on, you've got a guy to be your best man. You don't need your 7-year-old son to do it. But,
no, I mean, I think it's, and he said, the way the dad explained it was actually really sweet. This guy is not great. The ex-husband is, pretty much trash, total narcissist. But I think in this moment, he really was like, I really want my kid to be a part of this. And Mona, Angela's mom, who also hates her ex-son-in-law, and Tony, who thinks the guy is trash too, they both come over to Angela when Angela is about to say no and say, no, you're not taking the kid. What are you going to do? Who's going to watch him in California? They're like, Jonathan's super excited about doing this. Don't say no to this. We can go, we can watch him. You can make it a work trip. You just got an account out there in LA. Let's see if we can make this happen. Don't make this the fight.
Yeah, they're constantly going to be advancing the argument that, think about Jonathan and he likes all of this and that's what's important.
And he loves his dad. He's 7 or 8. His dad's a hero.
Yes, and B, the dad getting married and therefore sort of becoming more independent and being less of a presence in Angela's life is a good thing.
Is a real good thing.
Yes, so everybody is sort of constantly trying to impress that upon her to sort of overcome her kind of knee-jerk reaction of no, don't take my son, don't, expose him to all of this.
Yeah.
And so, they all kind of get the idea of what if we all go, right?
Yeah.
The Full House thing, the thing that happens every time.
Let's make it a trip.
Yes, what if we all go? And so that's basically all right, cut to commercial, and now we're all going to be...
It's the scene of the airplane, somebody making a joke about, something.
They arrive at the hotel, and I get the same vibe as Benson when they were arriving in Las Vegas.
Yep.
We're shooting, we took the camcorders, we left the studio audience behind, we're out on the road in the real world, it's some real hotel somewhere. You can imagine people are, just 2 feet off from the frame, watching them film Who's the Boss. It just definitely has that out in the world, completely different mise en scène, if you will, than the studio stuff. And they're checking into the hotel. And again, just like Benson, we're going to have a few dumb little gags of let's do a scene outside the lobby of the hotel. So come up with a gag. What if, everyone goes away and leaves Angela to take the luggage or something.
Well, so this is just continuing a conversation that was had back at the house. Tony said every woman in California is gorgeous and blonde, and they have, the state troopers are at the line and they reject people and only let certain people in. And so when they get to the hotel, the taxi driver is a tall, leggy blonde woman. She comes out. She looks super cool. She takes the money and helps them with their bags. And then the bellhops come out and they're sexy blonde ladies as well with the big 80s hair. It looked like a I'm Just a Gigolo video, for David Lee Roth. They all have that same, it's the same era, right? That 1980s big mall hair.
It is that thing of you go to the doctor to get your throat checked and it's a babe in a bikini somehow or something. It's that thing. And and again, it's just funny because Angela is an attractive woman. Granted, she's not totally my type. I mentioned the Big Bird comparison when we were watching it. They're just going to do everything they can to make her sort of awkward and gangly and not, or at least just more cosmopolitan and not beachy the way that these other people
She is
are.
always in a suit. It's usually dark. She's wearing these dark purples, dark blacks,
I related
dark
to this when she shows up to the beach in her, Hillary Clinton-esque power suit. I'm
power
that's me.
suit with a turtleneck, long sleeves and black tights. She's very New York.
But we do get, when we finally, we get to the beach, Angela's got her work thing, we should say, hanging over all of this. is that Angela has got the guacamunchies account.
Right.
Right. You got to think this would be a pretty
It's
normal
chips
thing.
and guac in one bag.
I would imagine on Who's the Boss, this happens a lot, right? Some funny little thing. Oh, I got an account for, whatever sort of suits the needs of the show. So she's there on business. And so we get what I was sort of hoping from all of these episodes, the montage of, what happens when the gang goes to the beach,
Yes.
and all the different things. In this case, we get Tony is surfing, right?
Yeah,
we get,
trying. He can't
yeah.
stand up, but he's having a good time trying.
Little Alyssa Milano is tanning. I didn't love that. Just a
No.
little sort of weird and male gazy.
Well, it was really so you have her in the hotel room. She's wearing kind of like a little one piece that has like a zipper at the top, and there's like a bandeau bikini top that kind of goes underneath that one piece. So it's sort of like a high-waisted short with a little zipper. And then anyway, that was really cute. And I thought age appropriate because she's supposed to be 12, maybe 13. Then later we get to the beach and she's wearing a full on bikini, which fine. I wore a bikini when I was a little kid, no big deal. But I just can't imagine being the camera guy having to film this scene. She in the montage, the scenes are her doing different poses while tanning.
And, just kind of flipping.
She just keeps laying down and stretching her arms up and arching her back. And it's taking the shot from the angle of her feet, like somebody standing at her feet, kind of looking down, but further back from her. And it was that's what I said. I was we got child porn in this. It was too sexy, and I was uncomfortable with it because she's so young.
Yeah, I was uncomfortable too. The very first dialogue in the episode is Sam on the phone with her friend talking about how one of the girls in their class stuffs her bra.
Which is a very middle school thing.
Right,
I didn't know anybody in high school who was still stuffing their bra.
I don't know. Yeah, if they did that in my school, they got away with it.
Yeah, we figured out push-up bras by the time we were in high school.
But that says to me 13 years old. She is on that cusp. And it's not meant to be, I think, hey, viewers, check out Alyssa Milano's hot bod. It's meant to be all the different characters are doing what they want to do at the beach.
Yes.
She's a young girl. She's obsessed with her looks and everything. She wants to get a tan. That's what she's going to do.
And now she was I'm going to be tan before, Christmas or whatever.
Yeah,
and
but
she
for
was
me,
so excited.
Yeah, looking at these, like we're saying, sort of male gazy shots, and they just keep doing the same thing, keep going back to her. So that's kind of a bummer, but that's her thing. And then
Jonathan and the girlfriend Heather, the fiance Heather, and the dad are just having a raucous good time. They're crashing in the waves. They're building sandcastles. He's throwing buckets of water on them. They're just really having a great time. And poor, I feel bad for the actress that played Heather because they have her in a bandeau bikini because that's what was really, strapless. That's what was really popular at the time. And she is running, actively running on the beach, not a little bit of a slow-mo. They can make it look faster. Yeah. She's hard running with these kids. And so you can see her in several of the scenes. She's got her hand underneath her armpit trying to hold her bikini up so it doesn't come flying down.
That's funny. And there's a lot of the three of them, Michael, the fiance, and Jonathan, the boy, all hand in hand. The thing of him, the little kid in the middle and walking around. And it's very much showing you they are getting along swimmingly, and little Jonathan sure does like Heather, the fiance. And then, like we said, Angela shows up full on black business
dark
suit.
purple and black dress, and and she's well, I had a break in between meetings. I thought I'd come say hi. I'm so glad I found you guys because, by the way, how do you find people at the beach? That's weird. It's hard now with cell phones to find people on the beach. But she just in 85 was able to randomly find people on this beach in California. But so she comes by, she says hi, and she realizes how much fun Jonathan's having. She just like that quick little moment we saw at the very beginning when they got to the hotel that she was left behind in favor of all of these hot blonde women. She once again is left behind in favor of this Heather woman, and her son isn't paying any mind to her.
Yeah, and when they get back to the hotel or whatever, what's going to happen here is Michael, the ex-husband, is going to basically say, I want custody of Jonathan. I want him to come live here with me and Heather after we get married.
We have a really good scene right before Michael comes in, though, that's kind of recalling what you were talking about before, how Tony and Mona are kind of trying to talk Angela off this sort of emotional roller coaster ledge of all the ways she's feeling. And Tony and Angela are sitting on the couch, and, you know, she's been invited to the wedding. Yeah. And she just doesn't really want to go. And I totally agree with her. I'm like, the new wife doesn't want the ex-wife at the wedding. That's weird. And Tony's like, actually, here's what she said. And I think she does want you there. And I think here's why. And, Angela's just kind of like it's all, very emotional and difficult. And he's like, but you don't want Michael back, do you? And she's like, she hesitates because she does, but she doesn't. And she's like, no, it also is very like her acting. And I mean, as a divorced woman, like that whole thing it really resonated with me. I was like, yeah, I get what that feels like. When I found out my ex was having a kid after we had struggled for years, and I should say me, I struggled for years alone trying to get pregnant, wanting him to be there with me. And when I found out that 2 years after we got divorced, or 3 years after we got divorced, he's knocked up some girl and they have a kid, and 6 months later, they're having another kid and they're getting married, I was like, what the fuck? Like it was really hard. And not because I wanted him back, because Lord knows you don't want somebody who treats you like shit back. And that's what she kind of comes to. Yeah. Like Tony talks her through this, and she's like, no, I like who I am. I do want better than what he has to offer. And the way kind of Tony makes her realize that is saying, all Heather will ever be is the assistant to Michael, whatever his last name is. And she's like, and I wanted more than that. And he's like, yeah. And she's like, and I still want more than that. And so then she kind of comes to that, and she's like, okay, I can go to the wedding.
Yeah, she plays that really well. Yeah. Like that, you're exactly right. It's like the emotional sort of trauma of seeing the aftermath of her marriage and seeing her husband flourishing, and definitely of seeing her kid take so well to the fiance. Like there are all of these very legitimate sort of emotional reactions going on in her brain. And Tony,
she's like, I'm tired of being the bigger person.
Yeah, but Tony in this like sort of long, extended, and really like well done scene gets her to realize like, oh, right. Like, despite all of those things and all of those reactions that I naturally have, I am happier in this situation. She says, I like my life, like she sort of remembers like, oh, right. Like, just like you're saying, there's a reason why I left that guy, and I like having my job here and everything. And so, yeah, like she lets this sort of smile come across and sort of like snap out of it. And realize like, oh, right, this is fine. And what you're saying is still true. Like, I don't know if I would really want to go to the wedding. Right. But, look, I feel like in my family, some of the people like to keep their weddings secret and announce them on Facebook. But if they were open to the public, I'd like to think that the different parties would attend each other's wedding, because it's like they're discovering at the end of this, it's like if everybody is basically happy with the situation, then there's no need for hiding in the other room and telling them you're on a date with Warren Beatty and all that stuff.
You don't have to live in the knee-jerk, like, what do they call that? Like the caveman brain feelings.
And you don't have to avoid each other.
Exactly. So like if, you can work through those feelings and you can be happy for the other person. And that's what she does, all within the very sitcom-y, 3 minutes that they have for that scene. And then Michael shows up and is like, wow, we just really had such a great day. And we were talking about how, we're going to be so settled here and really kind of like a family. And he pauses, and Tony interrupts and is like, wait, what are you saying? And Angela's like, he wants custody. Yeah. And then it's to be continued.
Yeah. He starts framing it in a way that Angela, and I think we, the audience, understand. Right. Granted, we've seen the title of the episode.
Although you wouldn't have unless you were reading TV Guide ahead of
You usually didn't know back in the day. But yeah, it's clear that he's basically dancing around the issue of like, yeah, I want custody of Jonathan, and that Typical sitcom thing. Bum, bum, bum. To be continued. dot. So, yeah, we'll leave that. You can watch part 2 if you want to see how that turns out. In terms of the beach trope, we get, kind of like you were saying before, there's a connotation to the beach, babes in bikinis, right?
Mona gets a moment in the sun to show off her body.
She has a bod for her age that will not quit, I will say. Very impressed there. Yeah, I should have, every time that they showed little 12-year-old Alyssa Milano, I should have just started thinking about Mona to give me a nice, legitimate, more than age appropriate,
girl. Her thing in the montage was she was hitting on the lifeguard who was way too young for her.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that thing, it's sort of your standard East Coast, West Coast thing where this is an East Coast show, right? You got Tony, the rough and tumble Italian guy. And so when you say, oh, why don't you have him come live with us in California? It's just, anything that takes place in New York or Jersey or anything like that. California has a certain connotation. It's literally the other side of the country.
Yeah.
It's just a whole different environment and topography and everything. And definitely, if for whatever reason you are somebody, whether it's because you're pale skinned or out of shape, if you don't fit into that sort of beach bunny or hard abs, Baywatch type stereotype, you're going to be threatened by it.
Oh, yeah. I feel like there's also this thing of frivolous versus serious.
Yeah.
The West Coast is frivolous, the East Coast is serious.
Fast paced and not relaxed.
Exactly. And so I think I'm sure that'll be what continues in the next episode.
And it's a connection to Mr. Ed because you have that sort of in this, it's not hippy dippy or beatnik. That's gone by the wayside, but still that more sort of relaxed, lackadaisical, bohemian sort of attitude versus the more business oriented,
but
non-beach
I would say in Mr. Ed though, they're all living in the San Fernando Valley, so they're all Californians.
That's true. Yeah. All right, let's move on to Married with Children.
Season 3, episode 21, Life's a Beach.
Yep. When we were talking about these episodes and trying to figure out which ones to watch, this title, Life's a Beach, Married with Children, Season 3, I had this vague memory of not only have I seen this, but I'm pretty sure it was the first ever Married with Children episode I watched. I can remember sitting on my parents' bed and watching this on the small TV that my mom used to watch. It's just random, but I remember Married with Children was something that my friends were into. My friends who kind of had older brothers or friends and stuff, and they were into this more vulgar humor. And I was kind of oh, okay, I'll try watching it. And what I remember most was to this day, anytime I use the word squeeze to refer to oh, he's got himself a squeeze. Who's your new squeeze? I am reminded of Kelly Bundy going, oh, that's Bud's squeeze. Whole idea of a squeeze.
They have a bet. When they get to the beach, by the way, this is totally a lake beach. When they get to this lake beach, they have a bet of who $5 of who can get a squeeze first.
Yeah.
And I was who can get I thought they meant make out with somebody in a bush or something.
No, your main
squeeze. I didn't realize what they meant until later on.
I think it's because Bud used that phrase.
Okay. Now I see what they're trying to say.
But not quite as bad as Mr. Ed, but I feel like I Married with Children with a suspicious glance these days. This is a show that definitely sort of embodies that mean 90s Fox humor that, sometimes we, think is not that great. But I will say this one I was pleasantly surprised by the whole vibe of this.
It was definitely a tamer in terms of meanness episode than I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, and more along the lines of what I was trying to get at when you asked me last time, because I think I watched this show kind of a lot as a kid, and when you asked me well, do they ever band together or do they ever sort of get get to be on the same page. And I don't know that we even exactly get that, but this has more of a vibe of like, oh, what if it was the Addams Family, but instead of being macabre, they were just kind of like lazy and irresponsible, you know, but it's got a little bit more of like them against the world,
right,
versus just like they all hate each other. And
and it starts with Al, because Al comes downstairs. He's like, I've been on the toilet, family, and I've been thinking, we never do anything together. We always say we're going to, and then we never do. And you know what? Today, we're going to do something together. We're going to get a family picture, and we're going to go on a family trip.
Yes, great sitcom-y premise, you know, just starting out as like one of the characters, literally scene number one, hey everybody, I have an idea, you know, and then we go from there. And we get, of course, Steve and Marcy drop by. This is maybe the last season before Steve gets replaced by Jefferson, the guy from Happy Days.
Season 4, she's, Marcy is single. Steve leaves like at the beginning of the season, and then later, and then I think it's season 5 I think season 5 is when. Yeah.
So Steve and Marcy
comes in.
They're meant to represent, you know, everything that the Bundys aren't. They're frisky with each other. They're affluent. They're, you know, polite members of society.
But not because they're like always making fun of poor people and trying to scam
yuppies.
them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're going to give them the beach idea because they're going to the beach. Now, I have to say, we were too busy on the, you know, sexual politics of Alyssa Milano to mention her visor. I thought was a great look.
So
I really,
80s.
I love the visor on
where it's stuck up underneath, like you got your hair all teased out and the visor isn't on top of it. No, it's not a visor that goes all the way around. It's one of those visors that like just as like sunglasses or regular glasses only goes on the sides of your head. So you stick the visor under your hair so your hair stays high and the visor, like the hair falls around the visor, and then just the part that protects the sun and keeps the sun off your face is the part that sticks out of your hair.
Works for me. I thought it was a great look on Alyssa Milano, and Marcy is sporting the same look.
Same pink visor, that's right.
Yeah, and so they're all like, we're going to the beach. We need you to do us a favor. I got into a car accident. Give this envelope to the guy that I got into the accident with.
I told them I was poor,
yes.
So I'm going to tape it to your door because I used your address as mine so they would know I was poor.
Exactly. And they taped the envelope to the door, but then Peg, another, you know,
there's
example.
Another smell in here.
Yes, this is the razor sharp, again, sexual politics of the 90s. Peg can smell money, right? She smells that there's a higher denomination of bills than she's normally familiar with coming from the envelope. And so she and Kelly go over there and there's $100 in the envelope. Steve and Marcy didn't trust the Bundys with that information. So they said it was just a note, you know, with information for the people. And so, long story short, Bundys get the idea. Let's take Steve and Marcy's money. Let's go to the beach.
Let's have we're going to go out to dinner together as a family. Or we're going to go out to dinner. And the kids are like, yay. And Al's like, oh, you guys wanted to come too? Okay. You can eat as well. And they're like, yay. Because we're still in this season. This was the same season that was the prom episode that we watched. But so the kids are still very much like, we don't eat every day. And then Al's making the same joke because some other lady comes up to him and is like, oh, and starts hitting on him. And he's like, yeah. She's like, you're so fit. And he's like, yeah, I don't eat every day.
Yeah. So step one is the beach.
Yes.
This is sort of what I was hoping for from these shows. Like this, you know, we get Act 1 is back at the house, all the stuff we were just saying, but then we get the rest of the show is going to be at the beach. And that's really going to be a full-on beach episode.
Oh, this is going to be just a parade of bikinis and on men and women, oiled up bodies and hair-sprayed high hair.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Lake Beach thing. It does seem like that, right? Now, this takes place in Chicago, or a suburb of Chicago.
Oh, is that where they are?
I think so. So it wouldn't be possible for them to be on an ocean beach.
No, but
they could be on like a big lake.
Right, like a Great Lake,
Yes.
which they have in Chicago.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, like I think that makes sense because I was like, man, this lake beach has an awful lot of sand. So if it's like Lake Michigan or something, it makes sense because there are lots of spaces on Lake Michigan where there's an awful lot of sand.
Yeah, they don't specify, but it's got the sort of telltale signs, the rickety fence thing, and the just sort of like rundown quality.
Yes.
And in classic style, we're going to get sort of split off in different story quadrants. And so Bud and Kelly are going to make this bet, who can snag a beach beau. Yeah. And then meanwhile, Al Bundy, he just wants to kind of relax, right? He takes off his shirt and I feel like he and I are in a very similar place. I don't know.
He's a lot bigger than you.
I don't know. I feel like
Jay, you're a skinny man.
I feel like Al is in pretty good shape all in all. He's just a little doughy. Like he's got that kind of dad bod thing going.
Yeah,
but he's in general
not like a skinny guy overall.
I don't think he's a fat guy.
No, I don't think so either, but he's normal. You're slender.
I could play Al Bundy's stunt double.
You're not.
Body double.
Who would look
for
like a
sex
scarecrow
scenes.
next to him.
Anyway, this, I will say, reminded me of our relationship, that Peg has a battery of, lotions and oils and stuff.
Yes.
Just like, you sit there and don't you worry, I'll apply all these little things.
She's got the athlete's foot spray. She's got bug spray. She's got Banaka.
She's got the thing, if you were in the 80s and you were at the beach, you had to have that.
Oh, zinc oxide.
Yes.
That's the sunscreen. The nanotechnology in sunscreen has gotten better now. That's the sunscreen I made you wear at the beach this year too. It it absorbs in. It doesn't stay.
It's like Ugg from Salute Your Shorts, right? He always had that.
Yes.
And so there's no other family members. That's it, right? And Peg she's going to go to sleep next to Al for a while.
Right.
And
She
his
wants
story's
like
gonna
suntan oil on her because she's trying to get a tan.
Now,
and so they're hiding it, but she's doing the thing where she's got on, Katie Seagal has pantyhose on.
Okay.
And that drives me crazy.
And it's pretending to be her bare legs.
Yes. She wears her little heels the whole time, so you never could see the line on her toes. But yeah, and I'm just like, I get it. It's for modesty state. It's also probably for like warmth because it's probably chilly. But I don't know, whatever. But I was just like, I was like, Katie Seagal, you're hot. Like, you don't need to wear hose.
Just because you mentioned the warmth, we should say, tracking this trope, we're back in the studio, right? This is not a real beach. This is back in your...
We don't see we see that fake water.
Yeah. No, but this is like the same thing with the camping episodes where you could just tell the way something is lit, whether it's a natural environment or whether it's, the studio. And this is Gilligan's Island. This is fake beach.
Very much. This is fake beach. So Peg is like, hey, will you rub suntan oil lotion on my back? And he's like, no. And then some hot lady comes over and is like, hey, will you rub suntan oil on my back? And he's like, yeah, sure. She like hits him or something.
Yeah, I don't remember what makes the first girl go away, but this is definitely a thing. Like, this happened on Saved by the Bell and stuff. This notion that if you go to the beach, a hot girl is going to ask you to oil her up.
Right.
Which, A, has never happened to me, and B, I don't
say,
really...
If I asked you, you would go, I don't want to touch it.
Well, here's the thing. I don't understand what this stuff is. Like... You have sunscreen.
That protects you.
Right. What is this oil?
It bakes you. It
like makes you get more of a suntan?
It makes you get, tan. It makes you burn. But that's what it does. Like for people who can tan. Because there are people.
Just to like maximize. It's like multiplying the power
Exactly.
of the sun.
It's the worst thing ever. But people used it forever and ever. It's like Kramer in the episode where he puts butter on himself.
Yeah. And that's what it looks like. Or like maple syrup when they show people like putting it directly onto their back, just like kind of moving their arm in a spiral motion and letting it like pool onto their back and then rubbing it in. Absolutely nauseating. And something that I was not familiar with because, as somebody who only had to be protected from the sun, I just had the white creamy stuff that your mom would make you rub in, or now you. Anyway... So that's what's going on with them. We switch over to Bud and Kelly, and we basically get Bud's flailing attempts to find a woman, right? There's all these hot young girls, and his main game is, I'm going to throw a football to myself, right? I'm just going to throw a football and then run over, pretend that I'm playing football with people, like these women can't see that there's like nobody else playing football for miles. And his thing is to just kind of like pick up the football and then just sit down in between these two girls.
Yeah, it's like he, you know, kind of went long and landed and then like kicked sand on them. And he's like, oh, sorry, girls. Oh, hey. And then sits down in between them, is like, hey, you know, just trying to like get his game on.
The football is his version of Have You Met Ted? It's just like his little intro or his little in that
he's
isn't
showing
even
how
an in.
athletic he can be.
Yeah, but yeah, he just like invites himself in between these two girls, and then he makes some come on. We haven't mentioned, by the way, this is peak Faustino mullet, right?
Oh, God.
This kid that plays Bud
Yes, and
Bundy.
it's also when he's still young, so he still has like little kid doughy body.
Yeah. So he has some line, it doesn't work. The girls like tease him.
Yeah, about being a baby, and they're like, oh, that's where your chest hair's gonna be.
She's like, there's a fly floating in the cavity that you will someday call a chest.
Floating in the oil that's on the cavity. Yeah, exactly.
And so meanwhile, Kelly definitely has a type at the beach that I would describe as Fabio, right?
Like the muscle-bound dude
long
with the big hair.
All long hair.
Yeah.
Just very silly now. Like, to me, they all have this sort of laughable look to them.
Yep. It's that hair. It's like Hulk Hogan hair.
Yeah.
It's kind of flyaway. It's kind of really big and teased up. I mean, it's all the like hair metal band guys too. But but these guys are all very like muscly and very tan.
And
like
it's funny that they choose to
big-chested.
present them all like that.
Yeah.
It's not like, let's make one of them have long hair.
No.
It's like, that's who she goes for.
Sure, that's who she goes for. But it turns out that the one that she decides to like settle down with and be on the beach blanket with, she's like, well, why don't you give me a ride in your convertible? And he's like, no, because he's like talking about life and sort of philosophizing. And then this other guy who looks just like him comes over and is like, hey, will you give me a ride in your convertible? And he jumps up and he's like, yeah, let's go. And then off they go. And Kelly's like, damn it.
Yeah, Kelly is basically stymied by just bad luck. Earlier, she had something where she had a guy on the hook and then something, a person's drowning. You hear off camera,
it was the lifeguard, yeah.
And so the lifeguard had to save her. So, yeah.
That guy reminded me of the ex-football player who played like the RA in Saved by the Bell, the college years.
Yes,
that's
because
what that
he
guy
had this
like.
horrible long hair too. Yeah, and he was a big beefy guy.
Yeah.
So, we're supposed to understand that normally Kelly would have no problem winning a bet against Bud, who could score a date, but she just keeps having bad luck.
And the guy with short hair that's a little skinnier than all the other guys that comes up and asks her to like hang out and go for a walk with him or do something with him, she's like, ew, no, go away. I've already made my choice.
And so meanwhile, we get a plot twist with Bud that could be super creepy, but honestly, like, I almost don't have the energy to be offended by this
No,
thing.
it actually turned out really cute.
It's kind of cute.
It kind of made me laugh because I was like, just wait like 8 years because you will be into this kid, like this girl.
And honestly, more like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But it
what
was
happened?
really cute. So it was like this little girl she's making like a sand
She
castle
looks just
or something.
like Stephanie from like season 1 or 2 of Full House.
Of Full House. Yeah. She is a little older. I'm going to say she's like 10. Right?
Maybe.
Like
very young.
Yeah,
I
she's
thought,
young,
very
but
young. Young enough that it's very clearly a comic thing. Like, that is the whole joke. She's a little
exactly. She's a little kid. And again, though, I think I'm going to go with 10. Okay. And her bucket is broken. Like, the handle of her bucket has come off because she's carrying like 2 big buckets of sand, and she's crying. And Bud has been rejected by all of these women, and he's sort of licking his wounds and walking back over to where his parents are, and he sees this little girl crying, and he was like, oh, hey, like, does a nice nice thing for like once in all of Married with Children history, and is like, hey, I can fix that. And she was like, you can? And, you know, he does what dads and big sisters do. We pop the little handle back on. And she's just like, oh, you're my boyfriend now. And just gloms onto him. And he's like, ugh. And he's not, like, he doesn't tell her to, you know, get bent or whatever. He just sort of like rolls his eyes and like, oh, great, whatever. Blah, blah. And then girls now start coming up to him.
Yeah, another beach babe
like
comes
two
by.
different girls come up and are like, hey, will you put oil on my back? Hey, can you help me with this? Or, oh, is like whatever. And this little girl is like, back off, and throws buckets of water at them.
Yes, she's super territorial.
She's like, he's my boyfriend.
Yeah, the exchanges with the beach babes are kind of cringy. You know, he tells one of them he's making a music video, and she goes, I'd do anything to be in a rock video.
Right.
Just always that thing. It's like, you know, they portray these women the way like The Simpsons portrays the angry mob, where they just like their whole like worldview can be turned, you know, from one extreme to the other. It's just like, oh, I'll do anything you say. Oh, never mind, I hate you.
Right.
You know. Yeah, so this little girl is going to scare off all of his potential squeezes. And so we end up with the stalemate, basically, between the contest of, you know, of Bud and Kelly. Neither
Except
of them...
for like the last minute, the little girl goes, he's my boyfriend, because he's like, she's about to go after Kelly as like another potential rival. And Bud's like, this is my sister. And she's like, he's my boyfriend. And then Bud kind of grins and is like, pay up, and gives it like, you know, hey, I got a squeeze and you didn't.
Yeah, and that leads to the line that I always remembered, where later on the parents are like, well, how did this happen? We got a third kid now? And Kelly goes, oh no, it's just Bud's squeeze. But meanwhile, Al's storyline is going to be that while Peg is lying there, sleeping, or so we think, Marilyn Beavis shows up. Right? There's a character name for you. She's almost like a young Mary Steenburgen.
Oh, that's interesting. I was thinking she kind of looked like Rose Byrne.
Okay.
But with like the more 80s haircut.
Yeah. She had a Southern vibe to me. I don't remember if she was really talking like that. But yeah, she has a little kid. She has two little kids. Okay. Her scene is bizarre as hell.
Yeah.
I thought that this was a dream sequence, like an auditory hallucination thing, the kind of thing they do in movies sometimes, where they play for you, the audience, the thing that the person thought they said, and then they say it back again and it's something different. Because she goes like, Al, I just have to ask you, would you make sweet love to me right here, right now?
Right.
And Al, like much to his credit, turns her down.
Yeah, he's like, my wife's right there. And she's like, I don't mind. And he's like, your kids are right there. And she's like, I can send them away if you want me to. And the kids are like currently burying Peg. Yeah. And he's like, actually, I kind of like my family and we're having a family day. So I just, here in public, I don't think so. Yeah, and he goes, and if my wife asks me, I turn her down too. It's just not the right mood for me.
Yeah. He says that's a funny moment when he says something like, oh, don't worry, I turn my wife down for sex all the time. Yeah. But yeah, he...
don't take offense. I think you're very attractive.
Yeah, in his own way, like he's very straightforward. He's like, I don't really want to like blow up my whole life. So no, I won't do that.
And then she's like, immediately sees another guy from her past and is like, oh, hey, Harold, is that you?
Yeah, and so it turns out we were supposed to accept that on face value, that, again, this is how Married with Children sees women.
She's cruising for, a husband to take care of her and her kids, because she said, I've been married and divorced twice and then had kids in that order. Yeah. So, like, these are single mom, you know?
Exactly, and Kelly and Peg have a, preternatural ability to smell money. This is how the world works. And that's kind of it. We eventually do connect back with Steve and Marcy, right? And sort of foil their whole scam against these people that they got into the accident with.
Because after Peg and Kelly took the money, Al wrote a note to replace the money that was like, I'm at the beach, I scammed you, ha ha ha, or whatever. and gave them the exact location and their address or whatever. And so this lifeguard comes over and he's like, does this belong to your Mercedes or your BMW or whatever? And it's the steering wheel. And he's like, yeah, the guy with the sledgehammer said, something about like, not taking him for a fool or whatever.
Yeah. Basically, these people that they got into this accident with, that they tried to, they said, here, have $100. It's all we can afford or whatever.
Yeah.
They've totally blown up their spot. And so, yeah, they've had their revenge. And that's all we really need in terms of like plot resolution. This has been a day in the life of the Bundys. But I like this because of the reason that I said, that 2-minute montage in Who's the Boss of everybody doing their own thing on the beach. We basically get that stretched out for the second and third acts of this episode.
Yeah.
And whereas Who's the Boss sort of goes for the obvious, like, okay, Tony surfs, Alyssa Milano tans, they frolic on the beach. This one, like, for better or worse, gets a little weird with it, the things that they choose to have them do. And, I like the basic idea of, okay, it's a day at the beach Bundy style. So what's that going to mean? They're going to try to hit on all of the sexy, beach bunnies and beach hunks, and it's going to go wrong for them.
Sure.
And Al is going to have some weird, like, sexual encounter or whatever. Like, yeah, I like it. That all tracks.
No, I think it was the thing that I was asking you about last time we talked about this show. Like, is there ever a heartwarming moment?
Yes.
And you were kind of like, yeah, but it's not like heartwarming. But I think this is as close as you get. He's like, no, I don't want to have sex with you, random pretty lady. And also, I would do the same thing to my wife. I tell her no. But it is all about getting that family picture, having a family beach day. And still being the Bundys. They're not going to change who they are. They're still going to be the Bundys at the beach, and they eventually they get the little girl that's Bud's squeeze to take the family photo, and Al doesn't lean down all the way. So we just get like his dad bod, like doughy stomach.
Boobs.
Yeah. In the picture. And then the three of like the two kids and Peg.
Yeah. Really from the get-go, the fact that this whole premise is going to be Al saying, hey, family, let's have a day or whatever. It just, it has a lot more heart than the other one where the whole premise was like, going to the reunion against my will to get revenge against my high school nemesis or whatever. It does just, it's almost like whoever was, head writer on this particular script or something, like it's just got a different attitude towards it. It is much more fun. All right. Time to move on to Friends.
Season 4, episode 1, the one with the jellyfish.
Yeah, so episode 1, the season premiere, we start with a recap from Joey.
Yeah, so we, in Who's the Boss, we watched part 1 of a 2-part episode. Now we're watching part 2 of a 2-part episode.
Well, what we're really watching is part something of a many, many episode arc that we are all too familiar with, right? So this is smack in the middle of the Ross and Rachel romance.
Yeah, this is 4 months after the initial breakup.
Yeah, and so this is one of the many...
copy girl breakup that we have covered extensively in our season 1 deep dive of the will they, won't they romances.
Exactly. This is one of the many episodes that we sort of glossed over and kind of explained, the plot developments. So yeah, at this point, there are many hours of content of us dissecting the Ross and Rachel relationship. I feel like we don't want to get too bogged down with that this time.
We are here for the beach.
Yeah. So, Ross is dating bald Christine Taylor. They're going to break up and get Ross and Rachel to get back together. Most of the episode is going to focus on that, but Chandler, Monica, and Joey are at the beach.
Yes, and this episode starts with the recap, and Joey is on a beach, like a beach towel on his belly, with his hand on his chin, telling us what happened and explaining it. It is the cutest little vignette of just Joey being like, so when I last saw you guys, Monica and Chandler were arguing over who was gonna, why they wouldn't date each other, which is so way early to be talking about that, right?
Yeah, well, it seems like now, again, beginning of season 4, he's talking about the end of season 3, they're starting to get the inkling of maybe that could be a thing, but
well,
they're still
but it
definitely
didn't.
got
It was
their...
still a joke, like when they actually put them together way later at the wedding.
The end of this episode, when they're talking about that and sort of floating the idea, like clearly the show has its hands full with Ross and Rachel.
Sure.
But do you think that was a thought with the writers and or actors of like, we're planting the seeds?
The actors have said, we thought it was a good idea, like from then, and like would push for it, but they were not interested in it. I think we talked about this on one of the episodes where when they sit up in bed at that wedding episode and the audience went freaking nuts, that was when James Burrows was like, "That we're doing it. That's it."
All right. So why are they at the beach?
They go to the beach because Phoebe has found out that she has basically like another mother, her mother's best friend who knew her mom and her dad and was, like her godmother or something, who lives out in Montauk. And Phoebe has no family, right? Phoebe's mom committed suicide when she was like 18 and her dad had run off. And so she was homeless. I mean, this is like Phoebe's whole story. Yeah. But she hears that she has this basically family member who lives out in Montauk. So she goes out to meet her. And this is the end of season 3. She goes out to meet her and she finds out that Terry Garr, this woman who's also named Phoebe, played by Terry Garr, is actually her mom.
Yeah, okay. So that's why they're there. It was confusing to me because by the time we're in this episode, they don't really spend any time together. Like Phoebe's on her own separate mission.
Right.
Terry Garr, this mother character, she lives in a beach house, right?
Yes.
Like you don't get a good look at it, but just the whole vibe of it, I was like, this is the part of the beach I like. Like this is
I like
where
a beach
I
house.
could. Yeah, just that vibe, even just that quick establishing shot. But so the rest of them just came along for support, I guess.
Yes.
And so they're having a day at the beach, right? Monica, right. Chandler, Joey. This storyline doesn't get a ton of screen time. This is one of those episodes, like I was saying, I wish there was more beach in the beach episode, but we do get Joey digs a hole, right?
Yes.
That's his thing.
Yes. So Monica and Chandler are continuing this conversation. She apparently has made like an offhand comment in the episode before, like, I wouldn't date you if you were the last guy on earth or something like that. And he's like, wait a minute. So he's trying to come up with all these scenarios of like, what if this, what if that, to try to see like why wouldn't she date him, even though it's just a thought experiment. And so that's what they've got going on. And they're sitting there on beach towels and enjoying the sun. And Joey's digging a hole and he's like, hey guys, come over, look at my hole. And so they do. And then the wave crashes in and he's like, oh no, my hole. And it starts to collapse because of the
childlike
sand.
Joey stuff.
The sand starts to fall in as well. And then Monica, like in with this wave also came a jellyfish or a piece of a jellyfish that stings her.
Yeah. And so, this is the reason why we're covering this, even like we're saying, it's not really the greatest beach episode all in all. 2/3 of it is really about Ross and Rachel. But this jellyfish thing is, of course, one of the iconic sitcom moments. It's certainly one of the, top 5, 10 Friends moments.
Right. Because when they retell the story at the end, they tell it in this very melodramatic
very good. It's funny.
way.
It's an interesting sort of cousin to the golf ball in Seinfeld, when George is telling the story. Is that the marine biologist episode where George has to tell the story, sort of
also,
like...
you have a beach in that episode
that's
for
what
a
I'm
few
saying.
minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I
the same
wonder if they
thing.
were paired up.
That's sort of where the retelling of the story is a parody, sort of a certain kind of thing. But before we get there, we get them just at the apartment, and there's this great sort of like shell-shocked, awkward silence between the three of them when they're like sitting at the table, just eating silently, like they can't look at each other.
Even before we get to that part, right? So they're at the beach and she gets stung and she's like, ow. And then Joey remembers he saw this thing on a documentary that you have to pee on it. And that, because they were like, well, we'll just walk back to the house. And she's like, we're 2 miles from the house. I can't walk. I'm in too much pain. And so Joey remembers you have to pee on it, and Chandler confirms, yeah, there's ammonia in the pee, that'll help it. This is an urban legend. Like, it doesn't actually do anything. Like, the amount of pee that you would have to like fully soak your foot in, it's like, it's not possible. Just peeing on your foot isn't going to take the sting away. Best thing to do is find a lifeguard. They've got the stuff.
Gotcha. All right, good to know.
But yeah, so they are kind of going back and forth, and they realize that the only way to do it is somebody's going to have to pee on her. And Joey's like, you can use my hole for privacy. And then we cut away and we go back to the Ross and Rachel of it all. And then later on, we get them coming back from the beach, and they're walking in this very like same sort of shell-shocked way, just kind of like, and the people who are at the house are like, hey, how was the beach? And they're like, fine, nothing, it was good. No, I'm gonna go take a shower. And they're all acting really weird, but Ross and Rachel and Phoebe are in the middle of their own dramas. So they're being weird, but they're not paying any attention to them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when, when they're all sort of back together in the big living room area. And the three of them are, eating or doing something at a table, not talking to each other. And you finally get it all. You finally get the story, and you get like the last 5 minutes of the episode devoted to it.
And Phoebe's like, what happened? Rachel and Ross have now gotten back together and broken up again. They've had the big fight. Like, Ross is like, we were on a break. And she's like, it's not normal or whatever it is. Not every guy does it.
It doesn't happen to every guy. It is a big deal, and it's not normal or something
like that. Yeah, whatever that like big line is. And so that's all happened. And then we come back and they're like, what? Why are you guys being so weird? Like, what happened? And so then we get the retelling of this story, and it's happening in parts, and they're each like telling it, and then somebody picks up with the sentence where it leaves off and continues going when they get overwhelmed.
Yeah, and each part is almost like a parody of a different kind of storytelling. Yeah. Like, Courtney Cox does so well when she's like, yeah, I'd been stung real bad, and she has this like old like gangster movie or something sort of like cadence where it's like, yeah, they were closing in on us. Yeah,
it was like the film noir, like PI.
Yeah, and then other times it's like the Robert Shaw speech from Jaws, it's just like all of the different sort of like stories of trauma, or like in the trenches in the war or something. And
Joey comes in at one point and he's like, hell yeah, I stood up for my friend. I did what I needed to do.
Yeah.
But I got stage fright.
Yeah, he goes, I would have done it for any one of you. And then, it turns out that Chandler was the one that had to do it. And there's nothing else to be resolved here, on that front. There's plenty to be resolved for everybody else. That's going to take another, 5 or 6 years.
Right. There's a moment in it, though, where Monica has kind of finished her part of the like dramatic retelling, and Chandler comes over to start taking over the story, and he puts his hands on her shoulders from like behind her to kind of say like, it's okay, I'll take over the story now. And then immediately like cringes and is like, ugh, and takes his hands off of her. It's so funny.
Yeah, they all do great. It's such a great like sort of showcase for them. Again, like sort of like cycling through all these different sort of styles and everything.
And just like we talked about this so many times when we have talked about Friends through the Will They Won't They series, but we never really get to focus because we were doing the Ross and Rachel stories, so we never really got to focus on the B stories of these shows, B and C. And so it's so nice. They do this great job of really making the other friends have funny things going on. Like there's you can have the laughs. You can take the story beats of the high drama and then like put it on pause and get a guffaw, you know?
No, and it is a great B story because it's like totally got one foot in the world of ridiculous sitcom chicanery. And it understands like if you're going to be invested in everything going on with Ross and Rachel, we're right in the middle of that ongoing drama, then you're not, the other story has to be fun, simple, straightforward, but it also is, like we're saying, one of the most most, memorable, iconic moments.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it does such a good job of giving them something to do, and also arguably maybe pushes forward this Monica Chandler romance that's still sort of in its nascent stages.
I was going to say, yeah, it definitely plants a seed in a way. I think, now looking back especially, but I sort of remember thinking that, this might be kind of cute now that the Ross and Rachel thing is done. Maybe they'll go there. And then forgetting about it because it just went away.
If nothing else, it's from something that would be like random that you hadn't considered to something that's specifically been asked and answered, and you have to now overcome this verdict.
Like, I would never date you.
Yeah, exactly. Which again, that's kind of a trope in itself.
And even the last line of the episode is, "You'll always be the girl I peed on."
Yeah. There you go. So looking back on these, again, lots of beach stuff, all kinds of different angles, and, what do we think?
So I liked Mr. Ed. I had fun with that. And we talked about this. I think a lot of times those like old, like really super nostalgia-y throwback ones that are like not even nostalgia for us because they're so before our time. They tend to surprise us in certain ways, but yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed it. I was surprised that it had the message that it had. I was glad that it wasn't cringy like last time, like flat out racist like last time. Yeah, so I enjoyed that. And I'm going to hedge my bets here because I was pleasantly surprised with the tameness of the meanness in Married with Children. And Who's the Boss had the best beach montage. So all in all, I can say something good about all of them.
Yeah, these were definitely all pretty fun. And it's interesting how the Who's the Boss and the Friends one are both like really steeped in the, sort of ongoing serialized drama of the shows, as we're sort of blithely hopping in to see like, oh, cool, they went to the beach. Let's see how that
What's going on there?
But yeah, I think it's fun also to sort of track the difference of how, like, Who's the Boss, like I said before, gives us that very straightforward, like, okay, this one's trying to get a tan, that one's going surfing, this one's flirting with the lifeguard, whatever, just like very simple. And Friends is more like idiosyncratic. And it's like, all right, we're going to come up with something sort of not ripped from the headlines per se, but ripped from the urban legends or whatever.
We're going to continue the same story that we've had in houses and apartments, and now we're just going to put it on a beach blanket.
Yeah, and it's just, but this jellyfish thing is just a fun, like, little quirk for them. Almost, if nothing else, the Married with Children one, I kind of like the best because of the sheer quantity of beach stuff.
Yeah, they are. They are at the beach for, like you said, basically from the first commercial break on, they're at the beach.
Yeah, and just the way, I feel like it's showing that's what the show was meant to be, is like you put this family of misfits in a situation that's sort of meant for people who are good looking or athletic or whatever. And like, the sitcom writes itself. Like that's sort of, hand in glove. And yeah, I think in terms of the trope, I think that's kind of what all of these show. It's such a specific thing in Mr. Ed when it's like the Beachcombers, and then it kind of falls apart by the time you get to Friends, but it's still like, if nothing else, going to the beach, it's always going to be a change of location, some sort of like...
The crew is going to hate you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so, you're going to have, for that reason, like, you're going to have a whole different situation. The cast is going to panic
because they have to show their bodies.
Well, but not all of them are actually shot on location. But yeah, and then you're going to have, you get to see everybody's bod, and that's part of that culture clash that they're tapping into. The beach is where everybody has to show off their bod and be sexy. So it's going to be funny when our sitcom characters have to do that, and just like we said before, that general culture of like relaxation, and even in a lot of these, it's funny, like Friends, East Coast show, even though shot in LA, so like stones throw from the beach. But
they're supposedly on the beach in Montauk, right? But like, I think they had to shoot very carefully so as not to have mountains in the background.
Yeah. Mr. Ed, I'm not sure where that takes place, but Who's the Boss and Friends are definite East Coast shows.
Yeah, and Mr. Ed is San Fernando Valley, California.
So not in that one, I guess. That doesn't have the geographic thing. But anyway, it's just sort of a contrast, a mildly special episode, if you will.
We're going to change it up. We're going to change our location and we're just going to go to the beach. It's going to be a beach day. And so that is like, I think to the question that you asked at the beginning, is it a trope or is it a setting? Like, I think in this case, it's both. I think that a beach day, like a beach episode, is definitely a trope. And I think it's different from a vacation episode. The one that kind of touches on both is the Who's the Boss episode, because they are going away. We get the airline, we get the hotel, all of that. That one definitely feels like a vacation episode, whereas the rest of them are like, it's a beach day. With Friends, maybe the first one of the two, the time there felt a little bit more vacation. Yeah, I think probably earlier when they filled the house with sand in that episode at the end of season 3. Okay. Yeah, I think there was something about like it was raining. They couldn't actually go to the beach, so that they brought the beach in. I don't remember the whole plot point exactly, but yeah. So in terms of it being like a sitcom trope, I think a beach episode definitely is, and then I think you can break that even farther and do the Hawaiian Vacation or the vacation, just vacation, not necessarily Hawaiian Vacation.
Yeah, because there's a big, like, this Mr. Ed plot is obviously, they all have different stories. That's what's so interesting. Yeah. And yet, they do kind of line up in those ways. All right, so much for the day at the beach. What are we talking about next week?
Next week, we are encountering flying saucers with Dick Van Dyke, Season 5, Episode 3, Aniuts. Newhart, Season 1, Episode 19, Heaven Knows, Mr. Utley. Charles in Charge, Season 2, Episode 19, UFO No. And The Hogan Family, Season 3, Episode 21, Close Encounters.
Yep, UFO sightings next week, and until then, we will consider this segment of the sitcom study concluded. Thank you for listening to the Sitcom Study. Tell us what you think or share your own TV tropes and topic ideas by sending a self-addressed stamped email to sitcomstudypodcast@gmail.com or find us on Facebook or Instagram. And if you like the show, consider leaving a rating or review on your podcast app. It helps us boost those precious Nielsen ratings. The Sitcom Study is recorded in front of a live studio dog.